KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
1 year after that violent night in La Mesa, a look back on how the city has changed and why some are still seeking closure. How much is a reputation worth? Local governments spend millions of public dollars to improve how they're seen online. And patients for a major local healthcare provider are warned their information was compromised in a month-long cyber attack. I'm Claire Tregesser, and the KPBS Roundtable starts now.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
Hello, welcome to our discussion of this week's top stories. I'm Claire Tregesser. Joining me on this remote edition of the KPBS Roundtable are San Diego Union Tribune reporter Alex Riggins, Voice of San Diego reporter Sofia Mejias Pasco, and KPBS Health reporter Matt Hoffman. A year ago at this time, San Diego was dealing with dual crises. Just as the first wave of the pandemic was cresting, videos of violent police encounters from Minneapolis to San Diego County set off a wave of national protests. One of those ended with violence on the night of May 30th in La Mesa, when businesses were looted and a few burned to the ground. A year later, Alex Riggins, reporter for the San Diego Union Tribune, is looking into what has changed and how some in the community are still looking for closure. So, hello, Alex. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the George Floyd case was the dominant story at the time, but just 2 days after Floyd's death, video of a local arrest was also widely circulated. Remind us of what happened to Amari Johnson and what was seen in that video.
Sure. So 2 days after Memorial Day, after what happened in Minneapolis, video emerged here in La Mesa of a white police officer, Matt Davis, in a confrontation with Amari Johnson, who was Black. Basically, what happened was the officer accused Johnson of smoking at a transit center. Johnson has said that he wasn't. There's no evidence that he was in the videos and the other documents that have been released about the incident. And Johnson kind of took offense to the stop, feeling that he was being targeted because he was Black. He was waiting for some friends there. When the friends showed up, they began filming the interaction between the officer and Johnson. And that video was what first surfaced. The officer is seen pushing Johnson several times, pushing him down onto a bench. And so because of what had happened 2 days earlier, there was just a lot of tension around police encounters with Black people. So, this encounter wasn't particularly violent, although, a lot of people did just say that it pointed out the run-of-the-mill discrimination that Black people do face.
Right, just because tensions were already so high, and then, these videos came out, and so people reacted. And I know you've reported since then that the officer was eventually fired and charged with lying in his report. Have there been any updates since then?
So he has some court hearings later this month, and then there's also the civil case against him, which Johnson filed against the city and against him. That one is on pause until there's resolution of the criminal case. But yeah, former Officer Davis is charged with a felony for lying on his report. He put down in his report that Johnson had assaulted him by slapping his arm or his hand. The videos that were released, including the body-worn camera video, his own video, never appeared to show that alleged assault. And so he put that in his report, and so he was charged with a felony for lying on that report.
And then part of your story for the UT focuses on Mr. Johnson and how he's reflecting on the past year. And he says he hasn't received closure. So what does he want to see happen?
Yeah, so he wants his chance to go to court and to see Officer Davis held accountable for what happened. The charges against him were never filed. The police department, because he had been arrested on assault and resisting arrest charges, and the police department decided not to go forward with those charges, not to forward them to the district attorney. So he was never charged in connection to this incident. He doesn't have anything specific in mind, but he does just want to see kind of the court system or the court case, play itself out in the system.
And he says his experience was similar to what a lot of people go through when it comes to racial bias. So how does he want to help share those stories?
So one of the things he talked to me about was wanting to start a podcast where he brings people on who've had similar experiences. What he was what he was saying to me was that he doesn't feel like this is a one-off incident. He feels like he's been mistreated before. He has many friends, family members who've been mistreated by police before. And so he wants to share those stories and make it kind of more widely known. He's kind of looking for his voice as an activist, I think. I think he held certain views before this happened that haven't changed a lot, but I think he's kind of looking for a way to take what happened to him and kind of build upon it and share some of those stories and become kind of a voice for people who feel marginalized and targeted by police.
And the La Mesa Police Department has tried to make changes over the past year. Is there anything different about the way it now interacts with the public?
Yeah, so one of the main things, they're one of two police departments now in the county, along with San Diego Police Department, who have a mandatory de-escalation policy, which means that when given the chance, I mean, obviously they don't always have the chance to de-escalate a situation. Sometimes it's just hot from the very beginning and they have to do what they have to do. But when they have the chance to try to de-escalate a situation, it's required of them to do so. One of the other things that has happened that wasn't specifically, within the department, but on the city council was they voted to create a new civilian oversight board. That board had kind of been in the making before all of this happened last year. But when this happened, the city council really chose to kick it into overdrive. So now this civilian oversight board, in conjunction with what they call an independent police auditor, will now be able to look at situations like this one between Johnson and Davis and decide, if the officer acted within policy, if he didn't, and then can suggest, discipline. But discipline ultimately falls with the police department.
And then the La Mesa Village area where the looting took place a year ago has a community feel to it, and volunteers came out to clean up and install murals in the day after. So has the community largely moved on, or does anything linger from what happened a year ago?
Yeah, so physically, there were two banks that were burned, as well as the Randall Lamb building, which was just kind of around the corner. The lots where the banks were, one of them is still empty. One has been, they've put up kind of just a temporary kind of shed type thing. The Randall Lamb lot is still completely empty. It's just gravel. So those are kind of the physical, able to see scars in the city. I think, our East County reporter, Karen Perlman, spoke to a lot of business owners and residents. And I think there's still emotional scars as well. There's still a lot of kind of grappling with what happened, trying to understand, why so many people felt so strongly the way they did against police or for the Black Lives Matter movement. I think there's still a lot of grappling with that and kind of with what happened the night of May 30th into the 31st, into that morning, just kind of trying to wrap their heads around what happened and if it could happen again and if the problems have been solved. There was business owners who were quite upset with police and fire department also for not doing more that night to protect or save some of the buildings that were looted and burned. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and I don't think a year later that it's all resolved.
And I understand you grew up in La Mesa. What's it like covering something like this in an area that you know so well?
Very surreal. I did grow up here, went to La Mesa Middle School, went to Helix High School, still live in La Mesa. And a few months before these protests, I'd been taking my son to, story time at the library. And then on Saturday, May 30th, I'm standing near that library as people are launching bottles and rocks toward police and sheriff's deputies, and as they're shooting pepper balls and rubber bullets and tear gas back towards us. It was so strange. I cannot. It still just seems almost like a dream. Like it was very, very, very surreal experiencing that, but also just hearing the stories of people who've had run-ins with La Mesa Police and with other agencies around the county, and understanding, that there are some real, true, deep-seated concerns has been really eye-opening as well.
Well, Alex, I really appreciate you reporting on this originally when it first happened and continuing to follow it for the past year. I've been speaking with Alex Riggins, a reporter for the San Diego Union Tribune. And thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for having me.
Whether you live in San Diego, North County, East County, or South Bay, there's a chance your city is spending an increasing share of public dollars not on public workers, but on outside public relations agencies. They're hired to perform a wide spectrum of tasks, from police recruitment to social media management. Voice of San Diego found that millions are being spent on these projects, despite many of these cities having staff that would otherwise handle this kind of work. Sophia Mejias Pasco is the reporter on the story, and she joins us this week. Hello, Sophia.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. So you start with the work one company, Loma Media, is doing with San Diego Police. So tell us about that work.
Right. So Loma Media was hired by the San Diego Police Department most recently in 2018 for a recruitment campaign for the department. Essentially, Loma Media came in to help create a brand for SDPD and market that brand to potential recruits. And this process included a very strategic and aggressive plan. It used slogans, taglines, paid media campaigns, billboards, social media, television, online ads. So it was a very expansive and an expensive project. It was a $350,000 contract between two phases of implementation.
And have they seen a return on that investment?
Well, SDPD hasn't told us much about their work with the PR firm, but for Loma Media at least, the work was a success. They list their campaign with SDPD as a model on their website. They said they helped SDPD bring in its largest academy class in 25 years. They also said they directed a record number of recruits to SDPD's online recruitment website, increasing sessions on the landing page by almost 150%. So if the goal was to attract and bring in more police recruits, it certainly seems like they achieved that.
So that's sort of their own tracking, not numbers from the police department. So we kind of have to take their word for it on that.
Yeah, that's right. The police department really hasn't said much at all. They kind of just gave us the one sentence response to our requests for information about the kind of work that they did with Loma Media.
Right. And as we've been saying, this has really taken off in recent years. You report that San Diego spent $15 million in 2020 compared to just $500,000 in 2011. So where is this extra money coming from?
Yeah, so at least for the county, a spokesman told us that ultimately the increase in spending came from a bigger availability of grants that the county uses to fund these PR contracts. As I noted in the story, 14 million of that 15 million spent in 2020 was spent on just one contract under the Health and Human Services Agency in San Diego, and that was for a suicide prevention campaign. And the spokesperson told me that these types of massive campaigns for mental health or anti-smoking are examples of the primary reasons that the county is spending large amounts of money in single contracts and why they're spending an increased amount of money over the past decade.
And then Chula Vista also hired a PR agency to work on a social media campaign to boost tourism. Does the city believe that it was worth it?
Yeah, definitely. The city does believe in this type of PR work. The marketing and communications manager for Chula Vista, Ann Steinberger, said that the city's PR contracts over the years has helped to increase awareness and attention towards Chula Vista, both on social media platforms and at events and attractions in the city. And like a lot of these PR contracts, Chula Vista got the opportunity to brand itself to the public. They have hashtags and taglines, promotional videos, and a website. And it's helpful to keep in mind that Chula Vista has been trying for years to elevate its reputation from a bedroom community to somewhere that can bring in business and tourism and innovation. And they've tried to achieve this heightened reputation through their police department's drone program, as we've talked about before. So I think, this combined with what they've done before in the past, I think Chula Vista is a good example of how and why cities are using PR work to boost their reputation.
And then you also described some projects that sound pretty mundane, like publicity for a water utility in Oceanside. Why did the city feel that was necessary?
So in the city of Oceanside, there are no staff exclusively devoted to communications work. So they already feel understaffed in that sense. And the city also has hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital improvement projects underway each year. And all those projects, which include water conservation, solid waste and recycling, and watershed protection, those can cause disruptions for residents who live in Oceanside. And those residents sometimes have questions or complaints about the work happening. So that's where a PR group can step in to field questions from the public, manage disputes, and explain the projects that the city is working on.
And all of these cities have employees, we should say, who are paid specifically to do communications and PR. So I'm wondering why these outside experts are needed. Is this maybe a story about the evolution of media and how we consume information, where government staffers are just not keeping up with new methods of communicating?
Yeah, well, I definitely think that's part of the story. I mean, yes, the way that the public consume media and information has changed so much just in the last, decade. And I think public agencies have generally been slower to jump onto, social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook to be able to reach the public in the new ways that they've been consuming information. But I also think that for some agencies, the work of branding and marketing and social media is a completely different realm than what they consider their work to be, which is communicating directly to the public with service information, internal communication within agencies, and organizing press conferences. So, for some communication staff, in some cases, this work is much different than what some PR companies do, which is, editing videos and making posts for social media, developing slogans and all that. So government staffers just feel that they don't have the same access to these types of tools and resources, which is why they say it's more efficient in some cases to hire out the work to PR firms.
And do you get the sense in your reporting that this trend will continue?
Definitely. One official from San Diego County already told us that the county's work with PR firms will continue. And I think the fact that so many of these contracts seem to be smaller but more regular contracts point to the fact that there's a continued reliance on PR professionals on a day-to-day basis to help the public, help public agencies shape a narrative and brand for themselves.
Well, and then there are many other examples in your story for Voice of San Diego, so make sure to check that out. Sophia Mejias Pasco, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.
We're now less than 2 weeks away from California's full economic reopening after more than a year of pandemic restrictions. Case numbers remain low here in San Diego, and we might even enter the least restrictive yellow tier before the tier system goes away completely. At the same time, one of our biggest healthcare providers is getting back on track after ransomware sidelined its online portal for nearly a month. Here with an update on these stories is KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Claire.
So let's start with the cybersecurity situation at Scripps Health. Over the past month or so, you've been reporting on the hack that disabled the online platform for patients. So are things back to normal now?
Short answer is no, things are not back to normal. But if you're a patient looking for care, it's good to note that their hospitals are open and their urgent care centers. So they want people to go in for care. If you're going in, you might not see any changes. I mean, early on when this ransomware attack was first reported, patients were going in and they were having to fill out, pieces of paper to try to get their medical records or to try to get blood tests. We're hearing that some of that's coming back. We know that the electronic health record is back online, but keep in mind, this is about a month after after being down. Patients can log in online and see their healthcare records again, but Scripps officials say that they continue to make progress on restoring their systems as safely and as quickly as possible. Keep in mind, when this cyber attack was first discovered by Scripps officials on May 1st, they basically sort of unplugged themselves online, and now they've been doing the tedious process of trying to figure out how they can plug themselves back in online safely, making sure that whatever these hackers are asking for, that's another thing too. We don't know part of this ransomware attack. We know that there's obviously some hackers that have some sort of a data and they're asking for some sort of a payment. We don't know what that is. Scripps officials have been pretty tight-lipped on that, and they say that that's in part because they're supporting a federal law enforcement investigation right now.
And as part of that, I know you've reported that some private information was compromised. So how is Scripps working with the affected patients?
Right. So when we talk about how many patients were affected, we're talking about 150,000 individuals who may have lost some information, 147,000 people. And we know that Social Security numbers, driver's license information was taken. We also know that financial and health information was taken. Now, Scripps not going into too many details about what that is. They put out a statement earlier in the week saying at this point, there's no indication that any of this data has been used to commit fraud. Now, that doesn't mean that it hasn't happened since. And we know that Scripps is going to be providing free credit monitoring and some other services for people that had sort of the most financial information taken. And it's also worth noting too, Claire, that they don't know everything that's been taken. Right now, they're going through this really tedious manual process where they're reviewing all the documents because right now they only know a small scope.
And do we know anything about who is behind this or how the situation was ultimately resolved?
Well, and I will say the situation still isn't resolved yet. I mean, even though Scripps has access to a lot of their online systems yet, we do know that, that there are other patients that are getting cancer treatments at other healthcare systems. So that tells you that they are not fully back up. And we know that they're still trying to get back up. We don't know a lot about who's behind this. The FBI was not commenting specifically, but they do say that, during cyber attacks, they sort of advise agencies typically before, after, and during the process. But yeah, like I said earlier, we do not know what these hackers are asking for. We don't know where these hackers are based. We don't know if they're asking for some sort of a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, or we really just don't know.
And do we know why it took so long to find a workaround or address the situation?
Talking to cybersecurity experts, basically they say, when you unplug everything from the online grid, so to speak, you have to go machine by machine to figure out, what was taken, if this machine has malware in it. And that can take a really, really, really long time, especially when you're talking about medical equipment that may have older operating software, like some old Windows software. So they're going to have to go machine by machine. And we know that hearing from Scripps officials that that's a process that's going to take months.
And I can't even imagine what it's been like for healthcare providers to go through this past year and then have something like this right at the end. So have you heard, what it's been like and what that kind of stress has been like for providers?
Yeah, the Scripps CEO, Chris Van Gorder, he said in a letter to patients a couple times, sort of basically what you just said, we had this big challenge in COVID-19 that they're still obviously working through, and then they're, hit again, buckled to the knees. But they said, that this isn't going to stop them and they're going to keep pushing. Also, the Scripps CEO really thanking employees for, he sort of said at one point, it's one thing to use manual techniques for a couple of days, but to do it for weeks is a whole nother ballgame.
So then turning to the COVID-19 situation, you've been following the latest here locally. Is there a chance, do you think, that the county will reach the least restrictive tier before that system ends later this month?
Yeah, there is a really good chance that we could go to the yellow tier, but it might kind of be short-lived because we know in less than 2 weeks now, the state is planning on fully reopening. And while that yellow tier, may provide some temporary relief for businesses in terms of allowing some more capacity, we know that all the restrictions are going to be lifted in less than 2 weeks.
And then vaccine superstations, which were, this big thing at the start of the vaccine rollout, now they're starting to be phased out. So what's the strategy going forward as the county tries to reach its vaccination goals?
Yeah, we were seeing demand slipping there a few weeks ago, and then we saw, vaccines open up for those who are 12 and over, and then we saw a little bit boost in some of those superstations getting more people. But you are right. There's less people going to the superstations, and now sort of a strategy that they've been using in terms of taking the vaccines to where people are, going to workplaces, basically just doubling down on the amount of mobile sites that that the county has, just really trying to make it just easy for people. That they think that a lot of people, who are they call young people, 20 to 29, where we see some lower vaccination rates, they don't think that they necessarily don't want it. It's just not easy for them to get it. So they want to just be able to, go to their work, or have them, like when they had some at the airport, people come off the plane, they say, hey, have you got your vaccine or not? They say no, they can boom, get them right there. Johnson & Johnson, don't even have to come back for a second shot.
And then you also worked on a story this week about COVID-19 booster shots. So is that something we'll be hearing more about soon?
Oh, yeah. The whole booster shot topic is definitely not going away. We know that, about 2 million San Diegans have gotten at least their first dose of the COVID vaccine, but we really just don't know yet if a booster, if a third round of vaccinations is going to be needed. And basically, it comes down to two things, talking to infectious disease experts. We don't know exactly how long the immunity from vaccine lasts yet. And basically, every month, they're checking that and extending that out. And then there's a big unknown with the variants. Now, we know a lot of these variants coming out of India, coming out of New York, out of California. We know that a lot of the vaccines are covering them, but we don't know how long the vaccines can cover them for. So there's a couple big unknowns there. But, talking to one infectious disease expert, he thinks that there's a 50-50 chance that come winter, it could be recommended for people to get those booster shots. And it may not be everybody at once. They may not say in the winter, okay, we want everybody to go out there and get the booster. Maybe we want everybody over 65 to get the booster. But the best case scenario is that hopefully the vaccines last for about 2 years, and then a booster shot is still a ways away.
Well, I imagine that as we get more information about that, you'll keep us updated. Thank you for all of your reporting. And I've been speaking with KPBS health reporter Matt Hoffman. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Claire.
That wraps up this week's edition of the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Alex Riggins from the San Diego Union Tribune, Sophia Mejias Pasco from Voice of San Diego, and Matt Hoffman from KPBS News. If you missed any part of our show, you can listen anytime on the KPBS Roundtable podcast. I'm Claire Tregesser. Thanks for listening, and join us next week on the Roundtable.
KPBS On Demand is supported by UC San Diego's Art Power, presenting cellist Joshua Roman, performing from his album Immunity, alongside music by J.S. Bach and more, Sunday, June 22nd at UC San Diego's Epstein Family Amphitheater. Reserve your tickets at artpower.ucsd.edu.